Hey,
Yeah, what's going on?
so can you explain how hypostatic properties can be distinct from essence?
Yeah, because person is not an identical thing as nature. Therefore, person is not an identical thing as nature or essence, and that means that the properties of which must be distinct.
So do persons signify an essence, or do they subsist outside of essences?
No, they signify an essence. By persons, they subsist within an essence. You can't be a person and not subsist within an essence.
Okay, so how would a hypostatic property then be outside of the essence?
What do you mean outside? We don't. What do you mean by outside? We don't think it's outside. We just think it's you can be distinct from something and not outside of that thing.
Is a hypostatic property intrinsic to the essence?
No.
Okay, explain that. Okay, how is that the case if you just agreed that it's inside an essence personhood?
Yeah, you can because you can be inside of a substance without having a property of that thing. For example, accidental properties. Do you think accidental properties are intrinsic?
Oh, so the hypostases are
No, I'm not
accidents?
saying that. I'm giving an example because you said they must be intrinsic.
Well,
So
yeah,
are accidental properties intrinsic to an essence?
accidental properties would still be within an essence, yeah.
So you think accidental properties are intrinsic to an essence?
Yeah. Do you know what intrinsic is? Do you think intrinsic properties are necessary?
It depends on how you're defining it. It would just be a
Wow, you seem
property.
confused. So what is the essential property? Tell me.
Essential property is something that must be that way for that thing to exist.
So is an accidental property necessary or not?
No, that's my point.
Okay, good.
So how is a property an accidental property of a person? How is that intrinsic to the essence?
Because it being intrinsic means that it subsists or exists within that thing. So if you say a accidental property external of the thing, you're just saying that this property exists outside of the essence
What
of
do you do?
what
What
it
do you
is.
define as intrinsic?
So a thing which denotes or is describing what it is, right? That would be an intrinsic property.
Are you describing what it is or who? Is there a difference between describing what and who something is?
Sure, but who would still be within what it is, right?
So how is a description of a who identical to a description of a what though? Because
I
you're
never
saying
said
it's
identical.
well, it would have if they're both if they're both intrinsic, then they would be identical insofar as their descriptor.
How does that follow?
Because if they are both intrinsic properties, there's no distinction within the fact of how they are properties, how they exist as properties. So in their actual existence as properties, there's no distinction.
What do you say? Sorry.
So there's no distinction within how they exist as a property, whether or not it's accidental or whether even if it's an essential intrinsic property, according to you, right?
So when you say that, for example, right, having like blue eyes, right?
Yo, Brett W with the $20 cash app birthday said happy birthday. Appreciate you, Brett. You the man. Thank you for that, man.
So
I
when
really
we
do
say
appreciate that, man.
so when we say like, for example, a person having blue eyes, right? This wouldn't be like intrinsic, correct? It would be like
Yeah, it's gonna be an accidental property.
because it's not like necessary to the being.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's gonna be accidental. Yeah.
Okay. So when we speak of the hypostasis, and they have like these properties which are of the persons, and these properties are only attributed to the persons but not to the essence for some reason. How does that work?
Because, for example, they would be like relational properties, right? How does a substance have a relational property with a subject?
Yeah, but like the relational property would still be within that essence, correct?
So yeah, so it depends what you mean by within the essence. But again, if you're saying that the substance itself, you would have to say then the substance has relation with a who somehow. And you would have to then explain what a relation even is.
Simplify it, like let's say a human, right? A human is the what, correct? And the who would be like the particular Nick, for example. But who Nick is.
Wait, are you a nominalist or no?
Is that relevant?
It is, because you just literally started talking about particulars, so it actually is very relevant. Yeah. So are you a nominalist?
Okay, so you're not a particular?
No, I'm asking a question. If you're a nominalist, bro.
I don't think it's relevant.
It really is. Particulars have to do with nominalism. So are you a nominalist?
I don't see how that's relevant.
It's relevant because particulars directly have to do with nominalism. So are you a nominalist?
I'm not a nominalist.
Okay, you're not a nominalist. Go ahead then. Like, I don't know why it's so hard to answer, bro.
If the particular would be what Nick is, right? The what would be the essence. So Nick is a human, and the particular of who the essence or the person is of the essence is who you are, correct?
So yes.
But this also subsists within that same essence.
So wait, what's that? What's the universal then there?
The universal would be humanity, right? Or the human.
Yeah, but how is that a distinct property from personhood though? If you just said they're both subsisting intrinsically.
What do you mean subsisting? So the person is what subsists in the universal, correct?
Yeah, it's the particular.
Yeah, the person, which is the particular, correct?
Yeah, that's my point. If my point is that if you believe, right, that the person is the particular subsisting within the universal, would you classify then the essence is also particular, since you just said you cannot have a person or a property that is of a person that's not of the essence? So do you think now particulars are intrinsic to the essence?
What are you asking me now? I'm confused.
Yeah, okay, so you said that you cannot have a property of person that is not also intrinsic to the essence. So do you think the property of being a particular is now intrinsic to the essence, humanity?
Yeah, so the particular is who you are, correct?
No, but I'm asking a very specific question though. Is the property of being a particular intrinsic to the essence?
The property of being a particular intrinsic to the essence?
Yes.
Being a particular is not necessarily like a property, right?
I mean, it is.
It just denotes who you are, right?
Yeah, that's a property. So, denoting a characteristics of something is literally the definition of a property. No, you're not answering. You're not answering. I just want you to actually answer. So a property is a denotation of a certain characteristics of something. So that is a property. Particular by definition is a property, how you just described it. So I asked a very specific question. Is the property of being a particular intrinsic to the essence?
Is the property of what?
Being a particular intrinsic to the essence.
Yeah.
So then there's no difference between particular and universal. So now you're a nominalist.
No, I'm what?
There's no difference now between a particular and a universal now. There can't be.
So what is your point?
That you now just turn into nominalism. You literally just became a nominalist by that statement.
So if you are Nick, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you have a human nature.
Yeah.
Right? Your essence is of a human. And who you specification that you have like blue eyes or whatever, you have a beard and all these things would just subsist within this human nature, right?
Yeah, that's my issue though, is now you're going to be collapsing person into nature.
I'm not collapsing them.
Is there a distinction between person and nature?
Yeah, we already agreed upon with the distinction, correct?
No, I'm asking, is there any distinction between person and nature?
Yeah, I think we agreed upon what the distinction is, correct?
No, we haven't. What is the distinction?
Okay, we agreed that the distinction is that the nature is what it is, what the thing is.
No.
Person would be who it is.
I'm asking, what's the distinction between the what and the who, with the person and the nature? What is the distinction between those two?
What do you mean? What is the distinction?
What is the distinction between a person and an essence?
Yeah, a person denotes a specification of what the essence is.
So the properties of the essence don't denote what the essence is?
The properties of the essence move or point towards what you are.
But right? do they denote what the essence is?
What?
Do they denote what the essence is?
Yeah, the essence would just be what
Okay.
essence is.
Okay.
Right?
So then by definition, then you would have to say all the intrinsic properties are now persons. Literally by your very definition.
How would that follow?
Because you just said that persons are what denotes the essence, but then you also said the intrinsic properties of the essence are what denote the essence.
That's not what I said.
That's
said it
verbatim what you said. Verbatim is what you said.
That's not what I said. I said the essence, right, would specify with this characteristic, the characteristics would specify that which you are, right? So the essence is the universal, like a human.
Okay, what is the distinguishing factor that makes a person distinct from a nature?
It's specifying.
Specifying what?
So the specified attributes would make you a person.
Which attributes?
Which are essential, inherent to what makes you that person.
But aren't those also just intrinsic properties?
Yeah, that's the point.
Okay, so then it's the persons are no different than the intrinsic properties.
Yeah, in a sense, essentially, there is no actual difference between your essence and who you are. Right? You are
okay.
What your essence is.
Fantastic. So you just collapse person and essence.
Do you think there is a real distinction between you and your essence? That's the question. Is there a real distinction?
But what do you mean by between person and essence? There is a real distinction. Yes.
Okay. What is?
Do you disagree? Do you disagree with that?
Can you tell me what a real distinction is then?
Yes, a real distinction is between two concrete things in reality.
Okay, so
you hello?
what do you say?
So you disagree, right? To be clear, yes. I said so. You disagree. You disagree. To be clear, right?
Yeah, I ask you, like, can you explain how you can be really distinct from your essence, please?
Yes, I'll explain by giving. Well, first of all, the explanation is the fact that person simply has a different set of characteristics of a nature. But I'll explain that, show you how that. So, for example, is a rock a person?
What? Sorry, what do you say?
Is a rock a person?
A person? No, not necessarily. No.
Does a rock have essence?
A rock has an essence, sure.
Okay, and you just said there's no real distinction between person and essence. So how can you say that this rock has an essence, but it isn't a person?
Yeah, so like a rock wouldn't be considered like a conscious thing, right? So a person would be describing things with subjective experiences. So this example.
What? Wait, what's describing subjective experience? What are you talking about?
A personhood would describe having subjective experiences.
Okay, but you just said there's no real distinction between person and essence, though.
Yeah.
So if there's no real distinction, that they're identical in reality, correct?
So if there is, yeah. So are you listening? So when we speak of rocks, right? Because it doesn't have subjective experiences, this would just be a category error.
Okay, are persons and natures identical in reality?
If it has a subjective experiences, sure.
Okay, so our subjective experiences, do they differentiate a person from a nature?
What do you say?
Do subjective experiences differentiate a person from a nature?
No, not necessarily.
Are subjective experiences intrinsic to a nature?
Not necessarily, no.
So there you go. You just gave a property of a person that's not intrinsic to the nature.
What do you mean I gave a property? So
you said subjective experience is a property that makes a person, but you just said it's not intrinsic to the nature. So you just disproved yourself that all properties of person must be of nature.
Okay, so I gave you an example, right? We have two instances in which natures can denote things, right? An instance in which a nature can have this subjective experience, i.e. humanity or whatever, and we can have this other instance, which is a rock, for example, which has a nature but doesn't have subjective experiences. So this would be two different things. Being able
to have subjective experience is a property of a person, right?
Sure.
Okay, so being able to have subjective experience is a property of a person. Is that property of being able to have subjective experiences, is that intrinsic to the nature?
If that's intrinsic to the nature, yeah, sure.
Okay, then what's the difference? So then you just admit that a rock can have subjective experiences. So why is a rock not a person?
Okay, good. Okay, let me entertain your line of reasoning. Sure. Okay, a rock can be a person. What is your argument now?
You think rocks are persons?
Rock could have a subjective experience.
So rocks can have a mind and have subjective experiences, because you need to have a mind to have subjective experiences.
Wait. So why do you assert a mind? Right?
How do you have subjective experiences without a mind?
Okay, subjective experience would just mean that you have stimuli and self-awareness, right?
So you think a rock can have self-awareness?
Yeah.
Why is that? Can you give me your justification? Can you give me your justification for that? What's your justification that a rock can have a mind or conscious experience? Or conscious experience, my bad. Can you give me your justification that a rock can have? What did you say exactly?
I said, response to stimuli.
That's not what you said. That's not what you said. That's not what you said. That's not what?
I literally said that.
You did not say stimuli. What? All right, bro.
I literally said that, bro.
You lying, bro. Now folks is on here lying, bro. When y'all get put in a box, y'all just start lying. Bro just had to admit that rocks are persons, and then he just got put in a box and he has to lie now. You didn't say stimuli. You said conscious experience. And I got this all recorded on YouTube, by the way, so folks can see that, bro. Just a liar. He's a genuine liar. Thank you for the super sticker. Jesus is my Lord. $5 super sticker. Thank you for that, man. Appreciate that. God bless you. God bless you. Where did that other super sticker go? I'm trying to find it. It was on here somewhere. Oh my gosh, did I lose it? Did I lose it? No way I lost it, bro. Where's it at? Where's it at? Where's the super sticker? Wait, was this it? Oh my gosh, I don't know if this is it or not, bro. I don't know if this is it or not, but Soldier of the Prophet, $10 super sticker. Thank you for that. I don't know if that was it or not, but thank you. Whoever sent it, thank you. I think it was you, though. And Cruz, thank you for the $10 super chat. You have what it takes to be the top apologist, brother. I've been listening for over a year now. The Lord definitely called you. You never give up. Happy birthday. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Many years to you all, man. All right, next. Muslims, come up. Please, preferably, don't think that rocks are people. I hope. I hope you guys will not continue to say that rocks are people.